We cannot put it all on Steph's shoulders. He's been carrying this organization for 15 years. It's too late for all that, Steve. It's too late for all that, Steve, right? Like, you, out of anyone else in this organization, are more responsible for that than anyone else. It's not about 3 or 4 minutes. It's a systemic issue that's been going on. I think we've all seen it happening, right? It's been the inability to adapt and be dynamic. It's having Steph run around like Sonic the Hedgehog in this system with players that don't even really fit it anymore, that a league has kind of passed by. So 5 minutes here, 4 minutes there, it's too late for all that. So much was made about the two timelines, the championship season of 22, right? This is probably what they were expecting. This is what, when Lacob and they were trying to move into the future, I think this is what they thought that 22 season might look like. And they were just 2 years premature with it, right? And now here we sit. Warriors with a valiant effort in Minnesota last night, right? Or yesterday afternoon, I should say, should have used that effort against the Pacers, right? And it's hindsight, but logic says win the ones you're supposed to. But you go all out against the top team in the West at their place on a Sunday afternoon, you just knew they were going to come up short, right? And, you know, I heard them talk about looking at the Pacer tape, which unfortunately I had to do as well. And yeah, it was embarrassing, right? And we had to correct this and that. I think part of the effort yesterday in Minnesota was out of respect to the Wolves, knowing if you go in there half-hearted, you could get embarrassed. You know, you could lose by 40. And so I think that was part of it, right? And then you saw Andrew Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins for the first time this year. Now, you see, yeah, I've got some snark to my tone in this one, y'all. But it's frustrating to watch Wiggins move like that and shoot with that confidence in that isolated setting, right? It just lets you know that his baseline of urgency and competitiveness is too low. So Steph has this big stretch of minutes, late third, all the way to midway through the fourth, where he sits and the wheels come off, right? It was funny. Even the Bay Area cameras, the NBC cameras, were panning to him on the bench. It was like the cameraman was like, yo, he's like, is he coming in? Right? Like, you know? And yeah, man, I just think that it'd be one thing for Steve to say that game 10 when we all saw this coming, right, in the year. But now, and listen, I don't know what to think. I am grateful for Kerr and what he's been to this organization and franchise, and I'm not naive enough to think that Kerr is dumb or stupid when it comes to basketball. That's silly, right? So when you really sit back and remove your fandom from it and you realize Steve Kerr has probably forgot about more basketball than we've ever known, what is he doing, right? Is he, now you get into like the, you know, paranoia, the conspiracy theory stuff, right? It's like, is he sabotaging the season in a way? Now, I'm not saying he is. I'm just presenting the question, right? So then the next question would be, why would he do that? Well, what if he knew this summer, this offseason, in order to sell Steph, Clay, and Draymond on doing things differently, right? On kind of having this changing of the guard and roles and stuff like that. To truly do it, it has to end ugly this year. Just a thought, because I refuse to believe that Steve is blindly making some of these mistakes. It's just too wild, right? It's just too obvious. I don't know. Maybe I'm just an upset fan. I think we all are at this point, right? Could we fall out of the play-in? It absolutely looks like a possibility. And I'm not going to lie to you, at this point right now, I wouldn't be mad at it, right? Even though we don't have the draft pick, just for the headlines. And again, just to nudge the urgency of the offseason and maybe have some more self-reflection within the organization of what they want to do moving forward. And once again, maybe Steve is a step ahead of us with that. Now, let's talk a little bit about this Wolves team, because they are right now the number 1 seed. And I think everyone has accepted that Ant Edwards is the real deal, right? He's the real deal. The question is this Wolves team the real deal at this point, right? And Towns out with the meniscus, you could make the argument Naz Reid fits better than Towns. He's a better defender. They both spread the floor, right? But he's not as needy of a player, right? I would caution Towns coming back from that meniscus and doing the quick turnaround. If you look at the history of that, it's bad news, especially for a 7-footer like Towns. So I caution them to be careful with that. And then you look at Conley getting the extension and how important he is to this team right now, because he really controlled that fourth quarter. If you go back and watch, Conley kind of won that game. And everything we thought he was going to do, he did the opposite. He completely manipulated the defense, hit big shots, and just did what he does. But yeah, I do think that this Wolves team is a threat to come out of the West. I'm not saying I would favor them, but I do think that they are a step ahead of OKC at this point, just because they have more experience, right? I said this at the beginning of today's breakdown. I'm not taking their talent over OKC, but what I lean towards is their experience with a Conley, with a Gobert, and even young Ant. They've taken some playoff lumps, and so they're at a spot where they're ready to take that next step as opposed to where OKC, I think it's just going to be brand new to them. I know SGA was in the bubble and stuff like that, but you never know. Maybe the youth will work for OKC as far as not feeling the pressure. But yeah, Naz Reid, man, that they let what he start 5 of 5. You know what his shot reminds me of? It's like an on-balance Jaren Jackson Jr. Right? He has that low flicking release that's quick, except he's upright. He's straight up and down. He's on balance, unlike Jaren. But yeah, he killed us. Conley killed us. And I'm curious. I'm curious to see what this Wolves team can do with young Ant Edwards in taking that step into superstardom. And I think if you are a Wolves fan, you may be a little scarred of the history of this team, because we've seen this and said this before. There's been the Wolves, while not considered a power team or a successful organization, they've had moments in time where it looked like they were the team to beat in the Western Conference, right? Or they were one of them. And then it all unraveled so quickly with ownership and just things going wrong, right? But so what I mean, so when I say that, I say maybe the window isn't as big as it appears. As young as Ant is, the ancillary pieces aren't as young, and mishandling of relationships, contracts, and let's face it, people probably not wanting to live in Minnesota full time. I think the time is now for the Wolves to get this done and come out of the West and be a true contender. Now, Underdog Fantasy, I gave out some picks yesterday and they hit. So hopefully some of y'all took advantage of that, and they were gimmies, right? It was the Kuminga turnovers, the Conley threes, and then the Wiggins higher than 10. I'm doing pretty well with these. But if you're interested in joining the Underdog community, having some fun, winning, this is where it's at, is these player picks is, I think, a gap in the market, if you will, of where you can have a lot more success as opposed to just picking games, right? And so right now you can use the code Alchemy and you'll get 100% bonus on your first $100 deposit. And then they're going to give you a free pick right now. There's a KD pick going that's basically higher than half a point. And just to get you going, just to get you rolling. Again, use the code Alchemy, Underdog Fantasy, support the channel. We've got a two-step in Florida, Miami and Orlando. Miami kind of having a similar season to the Warriors, just disappointing, underachieving, and people, I think, starting to question the core and what that is moving forward. But Spoelstra's always going to be prepared and up. They're going to be up for the Warriors. They are. I think they are. And then Orlando, look out, man, that's a bad matchup for us with all that size in the front court. And so they could come back from this road trip and it could just be real ugly. So I did a live stream yesterday. You can go check that out. I think I mentioned it in there. If we're not in the playoffs, I'm still going to cover the playoffs because this is what I do. I'm still very curious at the storylines like a Minnesota, like a OKC. And I'll continue to do that. So hopefully you can continue to support the channel, even if it's not all Warriors talk. Believe me, I'm going to keep covering the Warriors and we'll talk about the offseason. But yeah, man, as ugly as these final 3 weeks could be, I'm going to be right here holding it down, covering it, and hopefully have some positive things to talk about. As always, hit that like, share, and subscribe. I'm out, y'all.